Good evening and welcome to The Call, coming to you live from Channels Television Studios in Abuja, Nigeria. I am Kadria Ahmed. At 58, Nigeria is still plagued by a multiplicity of issues that have hindered her development and even threatened her very existence. Central to this is the failure to build a national identity and a country that will inspire pride and devotion. In other words, patriotism, that love of country that can help unify a people. The government has set up institutions specifically designed for these tasks. They include the National Youth Service Scheme, designed to promote tolerance and understanding among Nigeria's diverse population by sending newly graduated students to work in states and regions other than their own. Then we have the Unity Schools, federal secondary schools that bring teens from different backgrounds together to educate them. While in their early days, these initiatives seem to have had a measure of success, their efficacy is much diluted. And increasingly, Nigerians appear attached not to their national, but to their ethnic identities. At the core is what many analysts term the national question. How can we create a just, prosperous, and united nation that citizens can proudly identify with while preserving the identity of the diverse ethnicities that were forcefully brought together by the British colonialists to form Nigeria? What are the ingredients required? These and a few more questions on today's edition of The Call. But first, here's poet Dike Chukwumeregie.
We don't yet have a supranational identity. We have many sort of subnational identities that are very strong and well established, rooted in history. But the Nigerian identity, because it's relatively new, is not yet strong enough. So if you imagine them as characters in a boxing ring, so you have these very well developed fighters in the ring, Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, and you have the Nigerian identity that's sort of emaciated and weak, and it needs training and it needs feeding and it needs, so there's an identity there, but it's not strong enough to assert itself against other competing identities. And I think more importantly, it's not been able to offer purpose and meaning and welfare and succor to people, because these identities are held onto not so much as out of a love of culture. For instance, you can have somebody who is notionally Igbo, but he was born in Lagos, grew up in Lagos, has never lived in the East all his life. So now when he claims the Igbo identity, it's not necessarily out of love, but out of political necessity. They need to survive in the system as it is, because that identity offers him access to certain things. By claiming that identity, he can get a ministerial slot in the Federal Executive Council. His children can get into school. That identity offers very tangible socioeconomic benefits. And the Nigerian identity doesn't yet offer concrete socioeconomic benefits to the Nigerian citizen. What do you get simply by being a Nigerian citizen in Nigeria? Not very much. But what do I get by being from the Southeast, by being Igbo? A lot. So it's a rational decision. So when the Nigerian state begins to make the Nigerian identity attractive, people would want to have it.
To discuss national identity, patriotism, and nation building, I'm very pleased to have with me in the studio the Director General of the National Orientation Agency, Dr. Garba Abari. Thank you, sir, for coming. Mrs. Victoria Bosade is the Director of Planning and Research for the National Youth Service Scheme. Ma'am, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Kate Pam is the Publicity Secretary, Unity Schools Old Students Association. She's also here with us. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And Professor Jibril Ibrahim is a civil society advocate and former director of the Center for Democracy and Development. Sir, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, I don't know if you were listening to the poet there, and I want to start with you, Professor Jibril. He was talking about the fact that there does exist a Nigerian identity, even if it is somewhat weak and constantly taking a back page to, you know, the sort of stronger identities that we have in this country. Do you agree with him? Do we have a national identity as Nigerians?
First of all, I want to commend him. I was at his independence show, and he gave 1 hour, 40 minutes about the complexities of identities in Nigeria. And one of the key things he raised, which I agree with, is that there isn't one identity. We all have multiple identities. We'll have our ethnic identity, we'll have our religious identity, we'll have a national identity. So identity is not a choice between one or the other. We adhere to all our identities. Nigeria is what's called a federal society, and I'm not talking of a federal state, a federal society, with 400 to 500 different groups, and all of them have their identities. Now, do we have a national identity? We do. It may not be as deep and as strong as we'd want it to be, and certainly it has confronted...
What is the makeup of the Nigerian identity?
It's about feeling that this is our country. The easiest way to find out...
The question I'm trying to ask is, outside the sort of banality of belonging to this geographical entity known as Nigeria, what are the commonalities that come to fore when you talk about a Nigerian identity? So, for example, if you talk about a faith identity, people that are Muslims, there are certain things that unite them. If you talk about a Yoruba identity, there are cultural things that unite them. Language, you know, ways of doing things, etc., etc. So what are the commonalities that allow us to speak of a Nigerian identity outside the fact that we are in one geographical space?